Hey everybody, this is Tim Ashe, President of the Vermont State Senate. It is Monday, April 13th. It is 1 month to the day since Governor Scott issued his executive order, which really in some ways is the beginning milestone of the journey we've all been on together. And it has been quite a journey, both from a public health point of view and an economic point of view. And it's been pretty amazing watching the community rally together, generally speaking, to fight back against this great challenge. And so a month in, it feels like a million years in some ways, but also almost overnight because things have been happening so quickly. Today, I'm going to be giving a few general updates about where things stand in terms of the public health data, talk about a couple policy issues which are either being implemented or we're working on. Then talk about the visits I made to the Champlain Valley Expo, where the National Guard has set up a facility for up to 400 surge medical beds, and also Patrick Gymnasium at UVM, where they have constructed another facility on what is normally the basketball court. And then talk a little bit about some of the testing information that was discussed today by the Commissioner of Health and the Secretary of Human Services, Mike Smith. And that'll probably bring us to the end of today's video. I do want to say, for those of you who did not get a chance to watch the video that I posted yesterday was the first non-live day for me, and since this started. I spent some time just informally reflecting on the people that I serve with in Vermont government, beginning with the governor all the way down. And I enjoyed taking some time to talk about the people behind the scenes, if you will, who you see every now and then at a press conference or during certain news stories, usually during normal legislative times or governing times. But it's been a real remarkable experience, and I wanted to share some of what that's been like. So it's still up on my page, so check it out if you haven't already, and I hope you'll get some insights into the people behind the curtain. As of today, so we're a month in to this executive order state of emergency. We've had 748 positive tests for COVID-19. That is up 21 from yesterday. There are currently 33 people who are in a hospital with COVID-19, and then another 33 who are hospitalized who are suspected to have it, but the test hasn't come through yet. So what that represents in the sense of what that original curve looks like is, as the Commissioner of Health has put it, he thinks that Vermont appears to be plateauing. He is right to be careful in his language, because we don't want people to feel like we're already on the other side of this when maybe we're just having a few days of reduced positive test activity. So, but there is some reason to hope that the efforts that everyone has been making, the sacrifice everyone has been making across our state, may be starting to get to the peak number of positive cases, and that we might start seeing the other side of this first curve. The governor has been very clear that just because it looks like things aren't accelerating in the same way that they had been in recent weeks, that is actually more reason to keep the current policy in place to make sure that we snuff out this virus everywhere it exists in Vermont. So in some ways, it's good news. It does appear that all of the efforts that we've been making as a community are having effect, but we still have to be vigilant in the days ahead. One of the emergency pieces of legislation that we passed a couple weeks ago, and which was signed into law by the governor, allowed for, on a temporary basis, flexibility and kind of expedited licensing of certain medical professionals. And as of today, that has gone live, so that people who are licensed in good standing in another state, or who were licensed in Vermont but might have lapsed their licensure for either because they retired or didn't want to pay the fee and just taking a couple years off, those people can get an expedited temporary license. Now, some have said to me, why on the one hand would we be giving expedited licenses to some professionals when at some hospitals people have actually been laid off? And what I would say is that some of the people who have been laid off because some of the hospitals have cleared I think all the hospitals have cleared the decks of all their patients who are not emergent care. So they've postponed all elective procedures, things like that. As a result, there are some hospitals that have a fairly low volume of patients right now. And I think early on, some of the hospitals made a decision to lay off some of the staff and nursing in particular. The types of professions that we're thinking are likely to be needed on a temporary basis are other ones where it might be a specialist position, someone who might be able to do the work remotely in the case that the single specialist in a particular region of the state becomes ill or for some reason can't perform services him or herself. So they do seem to be contradictory data points. On the one hand, some people getting laid off. On the other, we're expediting people who aren't already in the workforce to take up positions. But we believe there's like no overlap in those two categories. So now I want to switch gears and talk about two visits that I had over the weekend, which were quite remarkable. The first was to the Champlain Valley Expo in Essex, where the Vermont National Guard has constructed about a 400-bed medical surge facility. It's a very startling experience in a way, because the Essex Fairgrounds for me are where I play indoor soccer frequently. I have been to the Vermont Tech Jam, which celebrates Vermont tech companies. I've been there for Junior Iron Chef as a judge. To see it basically a field medical hospital is really an amazing sight. The Vermont Guard engineers who came up with the plan have now become somewhat famous amongst National Guards throughout the country, because the blueprint they have for constructing the facilities at the Expo were done at such a low cost and so efficiently that I think it's embarrassed some of the other state National Guards who were spending way, 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 way more money for far less sophisticated systems. So it's a point of pride, I think, for the Guard folks who've been working on it, that their blueprints and efforts have been recognized and are now being mimicked throughout the country. Brigadier General Knight took me around. It was an impressive scene. I'll be perfectly honest. The number of service people there is in the 100 to 150 range. Many of these are full-time Guard people, and walking around and seeing all of them so prepared should they need to bring people into that facility was a pretty special visual to have. Brigadier General Knight, a couple times when he would encounter some of the Guard members who were there, would say, this is our first mission, right? And at first I couldn't really figure out what he was saying. And then I realized what he was really saying is that the very first mission of the Vermont National Guard is to keep Vermonters safe and to protect us. So while in recent years we've thought about them largely in the context of deployments overseas, he kept reiterating that ultimately at its core, the Vermont National Guard's first mission is protecting us here in Vermont back home. And I found that really powerful. It was kind of a good tagline for everything we've been going through, which is first mission, which kind of for all of us, I think the first mission is to keep people safe, keep them alive, and then to help people economically recover as well. So I was really grateful to meet many of the service people from around the state and beyond who have come together and constructed the facility. The state of Vermont actually owns all of the physical stuff that makes up this field hospital. And at the end of whatever time frame this has to stay up, we're trying to find a way that we can break it down for reuse should we ever need it in the future. It can obviously be replicated and put back up in any large kind of convention-y gymnasium kind of facility. So it's really impressive. I was very grateful to the members of the Guard who were there. It just really is a great scene. They have one person who is actually in the kind of air isolation unit they have, who has recently come out of a jail and has COVID-19. So they have one case. When I asked them, how ready are they? They were like, we're absolutely ready, but we hope we don't have to serve anyone else. And I thought that was exactly the right spirit, that they're prepared, but hope that we don't need to call on them for that. Second facility I visited was the Patrick Gymnasium at UVM. When I was a student at UVM, this was where I would peek through the doors and see Eddie Benton, who was a fantastic player back in the mid 90s for UVM, and where I've watched friends like Carolyn Church and players like TJ Sorrentine, Taylor Coppenrath, and others. And now it is effectively an extension or a wing of UVM Medical Center. They've constructed it really quickly. They had about a week of planning, I think, and then a week of actually getting it up and running. And it is a remarkable site to walk through and see how they have replicated all the major needs of a hospital wing right on the floor of the basketball courts. Dr. Eric Anderson and Daniel Hudson, who's an RN and is kind of the administrative lead, walked me through all the procedures, showed me all of the equipment that they have ready to go, what kind of procedures they'd be able to do there versus having to send someone across the way back to University of Vermont Medical Center. And the reason I wanted to go to both facilities was to see not only what they've been able to accomplish in such a short period of time, but we know that whether it's in this situation or in future ones, we will need a model and an understanding of how we can ramp up our capacity to meet people's healthcare needs should it come to be. And so I was really interested at Patrick Gymnasium how much of the effort and expenditures for constructing this facility required new money, or if it was just moving things from one facility to the other. And a lot of what I was looking at was effectively siphoned out of UVM Medical Center for use. And so it's a very efficient operation. And just like the folks at the Guard, they said they hope not to have to use the facility, but they are absolutely ready should the time come. So really, really impressive. And I know we have sites in Barrie and St. Albans as well. And I really think that all of the providers and service people have come together to put those up, to deserve an amazing amount of thanks, though I hope we don't have to use the services. Two bits of testing news that came up today from the governor's press conference with the Commissioner of Health and Secretary of Human Services. This really speaks to the need to continue on the current course in general. One person apparently tested positive for COVID-19 at Decker Towers, which Decker Towers is about I think it might be the tallest from bottom to top building in Vermont, or at least it was. It's on St. Paul Street in Burlington, and it has about, I think, somewhere in the ballpark of 150 residents. So it's a large facility by Vermont standards. Anyways, though, because someone tested positive, the Department of Health decided, just like they've done with the prison, and now is the new policy with any long-term care facilities, that they are going to test every single person who lives there and all the people who work there. And just as a sign of how quickly this new policy is taking effect, on Easter Sunday, yesterday, Department of Health staff with some support were in there and tested 139 residents and 9 staff people. So they did not hesitate once they learned that news. That testing, we will know more what the results are, I think, by tomorrow or the next day at the latest, but I think by tomorrow, because it being such a confined space with so many people, they want to make sure that if there is any other positive tests, that we're able to kind of come in really fast with a plan to keep people safe. The other testing news is really important in the context of what's happened in Massachusetts. The Massachusetts has a veterans home where there have been a number of people who have died as a result of COVID-19. At this point, there has been no resident of the Vermont Veterans Home in Bennington who has tested positive. The Vermont Veterans Home is available for former service members, or certain family members of service members can qualify depending on the relationship. There are 122 vets who live there, and there are 200 staff who are there. This is a facility that provides a lot of medical care, which explains why there's so many staff bodies. But out of an abundance of caution, the department is going to test every single person who lives there, as well as a precautionary measure, and also release that information. The news in Massachusetts, obviously, no matter, every single person who dies is very tragic. The veterans home, it was like wildfire and very controversial about whether they'd been managing to this crisis effectively. So I'm glad we're showing the proactivity there, and we'll hopefully get good news about the testing results. And then just to wrap, one of the amazing things is this is just 1 month to the day of the issuance of the state of emergency executive order. And it has uprooted just about everything in our lives in such a short period of time. And, I can only say, as one person, I represent 150,000 people in the Senate, that I'm really appreciative of how good-natured people have been, knowing that the decision to put the economy and our lives and education, all these things in some peril, was done with one interest in mind, which was saving as many people's lives as possible. And what's going to be hard, let's take the hypothetical that we are plateauing right now in the number of positive tests and it starts to go down. There will, of course, be people who say, it was never that big a deal. Why did we go through all that? And we can shrug our shoulders. It's not a really debatable point. However, what we do know is that much of the trajectory of this infection, this virus, went exactly as we were told it would. And once we started putting in aggressive measures, it did seem to begin to flatten the curve. And all the states that have taken the approach that Vermont has taken have seen results that are different than the states that have either been slow or not taken any action at all. And so I think that's a tribute to the people of Vermont for their selflessness and unity of purpose in trying to keep as many people alive as possible, which is ultimately what the point of this whole shared endeavor is. So I'll be back tomorrow at 5:30. I'll have some updates from the testing results around the state and a whole bunch more of things that happen in the next 24 hours. So look forward to you joining me then. Also hope to have an update on farmers markets and what the deal is there. And also I'll have some more information about whether in this window of time we should allow marriages to happen in more remote ways than we have previously, because there are many people right now who would like to get married so that they have their affairs in order, not their affairs in order, but their lives in order should one person be sick and the other person be able to visit, things like that. So the legislature is trying to think of emergency measures to allow marriages to proceed right now in ways that they cannot. So we never thought we'd be talking about these things, but here we are. So at this point, I'm going to sign off. Talk to you next time.